Sorry for my late arrival. I'm just getting wired, as you can see. I feel like a robot. We've gone to the length of preparing the Korean translation of what I'm about to talk to today. For the benefit of our Korean readers who might not be able to keep up. But as I say, don't expect me to follow that script verbatim, because I tend to ad-lib and I go off topic. But I'll do my best to stay on topic. I only got 20 minutes and the clock's running. So, just a quick mention, I'd like to thank TEDxPalgong for inviting me here. And I hope you've enjoyed the speakers so far as much as I have. Interesting ratio here with foreigners and Koreans. I think there's about almost 50-50, which is really interesting. I don't think TEDx and Seoul even had that ratio. So that's a really good thing. That really shows that there's an active international community in Daegu, and I think that's kind of a segue to what I want to talk about. Crowdsourcing is a lot of different definitions of what that means, but what I'm going to focus on is crowdsourcing as a way for mass outsourcing of a project or projects that are tedious and expensive. I've had a lot of discussion with city government about different projects on how to internationalize the city. And I've watched what Shanghai is doing with their international community, and I've seen what Tokyo is doing, and then say, okay, well, why don't you guys try doing this? Why don't you try doing like this? And they're like, well, that's too much money, and there's too much budget, and how can we do that? And Daegu is obviously a smaller city than Shanghai and things like that. So we've got to innovate. And one way to innovate is crowdsourcing. Taking a project, mass outsourcing it to university students, getting the university professors, university students to say, okay, you've got talent in this area, you've got talent in this area. Why don't we appoint some project managers and get like 100 people working on this project, finish it at a fraction of the cost as it would take to outsource to a single company, and get it done quickly. This is a big year for Daegu. World Championships in athletics. Beijing just had their Summer Olympics. A lot of media went there. A lot of the same athletes that are coming here went there. And they said, well, Beijing, you know, is great, but they didn't really have much international scene going on there, I mean, for media services and support. So I think Daegu's got a chance to say, hey, we're smaller than Beijing, but we've got something going on. And that's what I want to talk about today, is how can we crowdsource to prepare Daegu for these kind of the international scene. And I've just picked a whole bunch of penguins just to denote a crowd here. This is what I was talking about. Other Asian cities in their international events have set the bar low, which has created opportunity for Daegu. I think is a great golden opportunity to mobilize and prepare for this year's events, plus next year's events. And get people expecting not to be overly impressed, but really catch them off guard and say, wow, Beijing didn't have like this. Shanghai didn't do anything like this. But Daegu's got this. Wow, Daegu. And they remember that. And something's happened to my ear here. All right. And you can see the word-of-mouth marketing. Word-of-mouth marketing is going to be the real selling point with that. When people, because most people coming for world championships in athletics are not the athletes. They're actually media and the journalists. And those guys got big mouths. And when they go back, they're going to remember Daegu, 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 Daegu. And that's going to really spur future tourism here, future events. International events will take us seriously here. So there's a big windfall if we do this right. And especially if we do this right with working together in harmony with the international community as well as the Korean community. Until now, prior to, Koreans have a tendency to organize their international event structures and promotion according to Koreans. Often you'll have a whole bunch of Koreans who speak English well sitting in a boardroom say, how can we approach this to foreigners? How can we get this to foreigners? And that's obviously not working because there's a big cultural gap. Language gap, not so much, but cultural gap. And learning a language is not the ticket to getting into understanding the target market. And the fortunate thing is city government now is finally saying, okay, well, let's work together. And we do have an ear. And the mayor does have an ear for these type of things. And I think we can galvanize our efforts together. Crowdsourcing examples, Wikipedia, everyone's seen that. That's probably the most famous, one of the most famous crowdsourcing projects where thousands of people have came together on a volunteer basis to build a better encyclopedia, an online encyclopedia. If we can just, everyone has seen Wikipedia, but I'll show you another example called Gabi Jim. Can we click on that, please? I apologize for the slow upload time because my server is kind of cheap. And I don't get paid, so. Anyways, here's Gabi Jim. This is the website I started in 2005. And in the same concept as crowdsourcing for Wikipedia, we did the same thing. If you could scroll down a little bit here, we've got wiki forums. Take a look at this right here. We've got 9,600 articles of advice living, working, and traveling in Korea written by 1,500 contributors in Korea, foreigners. These are people writing and contributing on a crowdsourced basis. And as a result, it's got really great Google search rankings for various keywords. And that's really remarkable given the fact that it's been done for free, except for coming out of my pocket. But like I said, my server's cheap. So anyways, let's go on to, I think that was it. Another thing, in Daegu, I'll take a moment here to talk about Daegu Pockets as being another crowdsourcing project. Because of our Facebook presence, we've got the largest Facebook group in Daegu. We're able to mass mail and say who can help us for writers, translators, photographers, designers, and we get a lot of great feedback for that. And as a result, at any given moment, we tend to have about 50 or 60 volunteers working on some various aspects. Some of you might read that and say, Craig, you got 50 people. How can you get away with having some of your spelling mistakes? But sorry, busy guy. Anyways, I'm trying my best. But in addition to that, Daegu Pockets does cover a market, a needed market. But also, we're going to be starting in Daegu, which is going to be a newspaper, in a similar way as maybe Korea Times, Korean Herald would work. But it's going to be for Daegu, local content, national content, and some international content. And it'll probably start off as monthly, but I would like to see it eventually get into a weekly thing. And some of you might think, wow, that's a tough sell. How can you get into a weekly thing? Well, crowdsourcing. We're going to have to do crowdsourcing. That's the only way. Networking. Talking to university professors, say, hey, you've got a translation department underneath you. You've got a writing department. You've got a media department underneath you. Can you just maybe work together with us and say, how can we get your students motivated to enlist in this? Maybe even doing some networking and helping network. Mail Shinmun, Yeongnam Milbo, things like that. That's part of crowdsourcing too. It's networking. Still crowdsourcing though. So that's another thing that I think foreigners, when they come here, they're going to say, wow, English newspaper. I didn't think Daegu would have something like that. English maps, English content in Daegu Pockets. Wow, really? Because maybe I went to Busan, and Busan really didn't have a thing like that. So, and then also we've got a few other international projects that could be crowdsourced. English IPTV programming. We can have English TV news. This is something else that we're talking about with the city, but we can't do it without crowdsourcing help, without Koreans' help, without talent. English TV news, doing interviews, mate, so restaurant reviews, taking some concepts such as happy manan. So that's like for foreigners maybe can be given 10,000 won a day, and the camera follows them around, and they can only spend 10,000 won a day, and kind of the ordeal that they have to go through. It's a humorous concept for Koreans in the Korean program, but it can be done similar, interesting. On how foreigners can get around, and Daegu Misura, which is the beautiful people type of program. So there's a lot of different things that we can do for English TV programming, but again, we need the talent. We've got the international people ready to help, but how about maybe we can work together with the Koreans? English college radio. I've talked to some universities and say, well, why don't we have an English college radio? Work with Gyeongbuk Multimedia Department, working together in harmony with Yeongnam University Multimedia Department. We can have a 24-hour English college radio. Having all of these together can work together into building an international scene. This is, I'll do this very quickly. This is another thing that I think is a really tedious project, and the city will not, I don't even want to give them a budget because it's going to be too much. But Beijing Edushi project is a really fantastic 2D, actually it's not like a 2.5D, it's not really 3D, it's not really 2D, but it's really detailed maps of the city that they've gone to the time. It's only in Chinese, but they've got it in Hong Kong and Beijing and Shanghai. And they've gone to tedious detail, as you can see, much better than I think in Google Maps, and also some of the other Naver maps and down maps. And you can actually click on some of these Gunchik, don't worry about visiting the website right now, but you can click on some of these cities, some of these apartments, and it'll tell you information about this apartment and that, and also what restaurants are in there and the contact information. So this can be something that's good for mobile app. It could be good for something like a tagging platform, such as like Foursquare or something like that. Let's click on the Gotta Be Mobile one here. The next one down, which is another evolution of a map concept. So this is one mapping format that we can try and merge with other mapping concepts. Gotta Be Mobile, there's as a mobile site. Let's scroll down a little bit. We've lost the page. Okay, let's cancel that. Anyways, let's go back to the PowerPoint presentation. All right, click on New York Times. I bet you that's just going to be New York Times website. Oh. Okay, great. Let's go down a bit. What this is you've probably seen Google, what is it, Google Street View and stuff like that, and they got Bing. And Bing is Microsoft Bing is also developing this. Daum is also developing this. But these are car-mounted cameras that can be driven around, but also they go interior. Daum doesn't do that. We're talking about taking head-mounted cameras even and saying going into a restaurant and walking around like that. So people who want to come to Daegu can say, wow, this is what Novotel interior is going to look like if I come here for this event. And also different restaurants. Those type of things can be done by crowdsource. It needs to be done by crowdsource because we got to cover the whole city. And this can be tied in through kind of a multi-layered format with the sky view map down to the street map, down to the interior maps, and can all be unified. The other thing I was going to show you on the other site would be another thing that would show where the subway lines are and different bus lines just by holding up your cell phone. You can actually just get an image of the street corner that you're on, and you can see an adjacency of where you are right now. And that's kind of like a Foursquare tagging thing, which would be helpful. Let's go on to the next one here. So just to summarize, International Projects for Crowdsource Initiative, a weekly English newspaper, in addition to the monthly magazine for maps and entertainment. IPTV English program, English College Radio, 2D, 3D, street and interior mapping, and also mass translation of relevant Korean content. Something that a lot of us have noticed, foreigners have noticed, that the tourism information in Korean is much bigger than the English information, and we're only given a sampling, and sometimes the English writing is kind of not really expressive. But imagine if we had a crowdsourcing initiative to do mass translation of Korean, Daegu history, Daegu culture, all these things that maybe we feel that we're missing, that will enable foreigners to get in a deeper, closer relationship with Daegu. That's something also could be a crowdsourcing initiative. And the thing is that, yes, we got this big event coming up in August, but also future events. I think we can get all of these things done through proper crowdsourcing and networking within 5 months, 6 months. And I've told people this, I've told city people this, and I've told Koreans this, and they're like, what? No way. There's no way you can do this on a fractional budget. There's no way that you can do this in that amount of time. And I tend to disagree. Why? Because the miracle in the hand. You're Korea. Look what you did. You started from 1970, the post-war, and look this now. That was a much smaller project. That was a crowdsourcing project. Park Jong-hee said, let's get it together. And what did Koreans do? They got it together. They got it together all together. And look, it was way down here right now. So there's the history shows that Korea can crowdsource. Koreans love to network. Everyone seems to know each other somehow through some chain of relation. It can happen like that. And specifically, Daegu does have crowdsourcing history. Gukshi Pasam Park, this whole memorial bell is reminiscent of a crowdsourcing movement that started in 1907. Not a really happy time because it was during the Japanese occupation. And Japan imposed a debt for occupation debt on Korea, and what else can you do? And they said, okay, well, Koreans said, well, we got to get it together. We got to pay off this debt. And you know where that movement started? Is in Daegu. The movement to rally everyone to pay off this debt and say, come on, let's lead by, and Daegu led by example. And next thing you know, the other cities followed by example. So there is a history there. So I really don't believe it when people say, oh, we can't do these little projects that I'm talking about when great projects have been done in the past. So I think Koreans, and especially Daegu citizens, have to remember their past and where they came from and look forward to the future on where they can go, especially with when it comes to crowdsourcing for internationalization projects. And that concludes everything that I wanted to discuss. I really appreciate for you giving me a chance to talk, and if you have any more questions, I'll be around at the after party, and I'll be happy to talk with you more. Thanks.